So this is going to be a story from Dirty Bertie, the Worms book, but this book that we're going to read next, this story is going to be called Rubbish. And remember that Dirty Bertie is a fiction book, so it's made up, it's not fact. And that means it's from somebody's head and it's pretend. So Dirty Bertie looks like he's in bed just there, look, and it's about rubbish. Rumble, rumble, screech and snort. Something was making a noise outside Bertie's window. He sat up in bed. It was Saturday, Bertie's favourite day of the week. Saturday was bin day. He pulled back his curtains and sure enough, there was the dust cart at the far end of the road, and if he hurried, he would be just in time, so he loves the dustbin men. Downstairs, he found Mum making tea in the kitchen. "Morning, Bertie," she broke off and stared at him. "What on earth are you wearing?" Bertie looked at his outfit. He had put on Dad's painting overalls, a woolly hat, a muddy pair of wellies, and true, the overalls were a bit big, but Bertie thought they would be perfect for being a bin man. So he's dressing up as a bin man. "It's Saturday," he said, "and I've got to help Ed with the bins." "Oh, Bertie, not today," sighed Mum. "Why not? It's the summer fair this morning at school, and I don't want you getting filthy." "That's why I'm wearing these," said Bertie, flapping his long sleeves. "Anyway," said Mum, "you're late. I took the rubbish out last night." "Oh, but I always do it," said Bertie. "Sorry, I forgot. You can do it next time," said Mum. He stared after his mum as she disappeared upstairs with her cup of tea. Whiffer looked up from a bone he was licking and he blinked at him. How could she forget? "I always take the rubbish out on Saturdays." When he grew up, Bertie had decided he wanted to be a bin man. He wanted to wear an orange jacket and big gloves and ride in a truck that snorted like a dragon. My bin man doesn't have a truck that snorts like a dragon. Does your bin man have a truck that snorts like a dragon? My bin man does wear an orange jacket and big gloves, though. And we've also got bin women, with bin people. Most of all, he wanted to work with mountains of messy, smelly, sticky rubbish. Bertie loved rubbish. He had piles of it under his bed. String, lolly sticks, rubber bands, sweet wrappers. Do you have dirty things like that under your bed? I know people in my house sometimes have really lots of rubbish under their bed, and I get very, very cross. He began to rummage in the drawers. The bin men would be here any minute. Finally, he found out what he was looking for. A large black bin bag. So here we go. All he needed now was a few bits of rubbish to fill it with. In went a dishcloth, a bar of soap, a tin of cat food. These don't sound like rubbish to me. And a pile of letters from Bertie's school. No one had ever read them anyway. In went his dad's slippers, some carrots, yuck, a cauliflower, so you can see here. Got a cauliflower in there, that looks like a sweet corn. He's putting a plant in, which looks like a beautiful plant with gorgeous flowers. And he put in his sister's pony magazine. Definitely not rubbish. Rumble, rumble, the dustbin man was coming. Bertie scooted into the hall, dragging his bag behind him. Someone had left an old pot of flowers by the front door ready to throw out. Bertie scooted into the bag with the rest. Now, I have a plant by my front door, which I think probably is what Bertie's mum's got by her front door, and my plant is beautiful, and Bertie's mum's plant looks beautiful, doesn't it? We've just said that. I don't think that was waiting to go out for the rubbish. I think that might have just been a decoration in the hallway. He's a little bit of a monkey. The wheelie bin stood on the pavement. Bertie climbed onto the front wall so he could reach to drop his bag in. He peered into the bin, sniffing the sweet smell of rotten vegetables. I don't think that's a sweet smell at all. But can you see what's happened? I can just see little feet poking out. In one corner, he caught sight of something familiar. Wasn't that his chewing gum collection? Surely his mum hadn't thrown away his chewing gum collection. He bent into the bin to try and rescue it, and the jar was just out of his reach, so he'd have to stretch, and Bertie fell in head first. His face was wedged against something soft and squashy. Help! "Hello, mate," said a voice. "Having a bit of trouble there?" Strong hands pulled him out and set him on his feet. "Oh dear," grinned Ed. "Your mum is not going to be pleased." Bertie inspected himself. He did seem to have got a bit messy. There was something sticky on his overalls that smelled like tomato ketchup. He brushed some tea leaves off himself and straightened his hat. A piece of potato peel fell off. He held up the rescued jam jar to show Ed. I was looking for this. It's my chewing gum collection, he explained. I'm doing an experiment to see what happens when chewing gum gets really old. And what does happen? Said Ed. It goes hard and it tastes really disgusting, said Bertie. Do you want to try some? No thanks, said Ed. I've got to get on. Want to give me a hand? Yes, please, said Bertie. I brought you an extra bag today. Bertie presented him with the rubbish he had collected. Ed dropped the bag in the wheelie bin, and Bertie pulled it to the waiting truck. He watched, fascinated, as the truck opened its metal jaws and swallowed up the rubbish. Ed held out a gloved hand, and Bertie shook it. Good work, mate, said Ed. I'll see you next week. And he moved off down the road whistling. See you, said Bertie, so he still got to help with the rubbish. Back in the house, Bertie whistled as he spooned dog food into Whiffer's bowl, and he whistled as he took off his overalls, and he sat down to have some breakfast. Bertie, please, said Dad. What? Said Bertie. I'm only whistling. That isn't whistling. It sounds like you've got a puncture. So can you whistle? I can't whistle, but is how you do it. And some people can do it and some people can't. But I don't think Bertie can. I think he might be whistling like me, sounding like air's coming out, but nothing's actually very tuneful. And there he is feeding the dog his breakfast. Well, I've got to practice, said Bertie. How can I learn to whistle if you don't let me practice? Mum came into the kitchen looking flustered. Bertie, have you seen my flower arrangement? I left it by the front door this morning. Bertie paused with his finger in the peanut butter. By the door? Yes, it's for the competition at the summer fair, so it wasn't decoration for the house. It was for a competition. I spent hours working on it, and now it's disappeared. Are you sure you haven't seen it? No, said Bertie. Are you all right? You look a bit pale, said Mum. I'm fine, said Bertie, who suddenly wasn't feeling so well. He remembered the pot of old flowers by the front door, and he remembered putting it in his rubbish bag. Oh, the dust cart must have eaten it. You see, there he is, looking a little bit worried. His eyes are big and round. He's a bit startled. Now he thought about it, Mum had been going on about that competition for weeks. First prize always went to Mrs. Nicely next door, but this year Bertie's mum felt she might win, or she could have done. And how was Bertie supposed to end up flowers by the doors with her? They looked a bit dead. He got up from the table and sidled towards the door. Where are you going? Asked Mum. You haven't finished your breakfast. I just need to do something. And what's this all over Dad's overalls? Said Mum. Just ketchup. I had a bit of an accident. Bertie! But Bertie was making for the door. If he was going to get those flowers back, he would need to move fast. So he's going to try and rescue the flowers for his mum's competition. Bertie bent over the handlebars of his bike, pedalling at top speed. You can see him there going really fast. The dog's following him. Whiffer scampered behind, trying to keep up. Maybe he was too late already. Even if he caught up with the dust cart now, how was he going to get the flowers back? Ed had told him that all the dustbin men took their loads to an enormous dump. Perhaps Ed would let him hunt through the mountains of rubbish there. Bertie loved the idea of that, but at the end of the road there was no sign of either Ed or the truck. Now it might be miles away. He sped on towards the park and slammed on his brakes at the corner. There, parked 100 metres away, was the dust cart. Hey, called Bertie. Hey, wait a minute. The truck was starting to pull away, and it got up speed and turned a corner and vanished. Bertie looked down at Whiffer, whose ears drooped in sympathy. He was sunk. Mum would scream. Dad would shout. He would be sent to his room for 1,000,000 years. Look, there we go. Bertie, is that you? Called Mum as he crept in through the front door. No, said Bertie. I want a word with you now. Oh, she's cross. Bertie drooped into the kitchen where Mum, Dad and Susie were waiting for him, and he could tell by their faces that he had been discovered, so they know what he's done. Where are my slippers? Said Dad. Where's my Pony Weekly magazine? Said Susie. And what have you done with my flower arrangement? Demanded Mum. Why do I always get the blame? Said Bertie. It's not my fault if people keep losing things. It is his fault though, isn't it? Mum folded her arms. Look at me, Bertie. I want the truth. Did you touch those flowers? Bertie tried to look at his mum. I might have given them to someone, he said. I told you, said Susie. Who? Demanded Mum. Bertie tried to think of an answer. He wanted to tell the truth, but the truth was he'd given the flowers to the dustbin lorry. By now they were probably buried under 6 feet of cabbages and nappies. I gave them to Gran, he said with sudden inspiration. And there he's looking pleased with his idea there, isn't he? Gran? What on earth for? She likes flowers, said Bertie, and she likes smelling them and stuff. Mum did not look convinced. "And when did you do this?" "This morning," said Bertie. "I saw them by the front door, and I thought I'd take them to Gran to cheer her up." His family stared at him. Bertie had never given flowers to anyone before. On the other hand, he had been known to do all sorts of weird things. Mum's expression softened a little bit. "Well, it was a nice thought, Bertie, but I need those flowers back. They've got to be at the church hall by 10. I'll give Gran a ring." She picked up the phone. "No," said Bertie. I'll go round. It'll be quicker. She's probably finished smelling them by now." Mum put the phone back on the stand. "All right, but you'd better hurry. If you miss, or I miss, the competition, you are in serious trouble." Bertie set off with Whiffer paddling beside him. At the end of the road, he sat down on a wall to think. So you can see that he looks a bit glum, fed up, doesn't he? Because he doesn't quite know how he's going to get these flowers back. And Whiffer's having a little smell of some dog poo, I think. Not very nice. At the end of the road, he started to think. What was he going to do? Bringing Gran into it had only made things worse, and now Mum expected him to come back with her stupid flower arrangement. He stared gloomily at Whiffer, who was sniffing around in the garden behind him. The house was empty at the front, garden overgrown with tall weeds, and suddenly Bertie had a brilliant idea. What was to stop him making his own flower arrangement? It must be easy. There were hundreds of flowers right here in this old garden that nobody wanted. All he had to do was pick a handful, stick them in a pot, and enter it in the competition. If he took it to the church hall himself, Mum might never find out. Half an hour later, Bertie had put his plan into operation. The new flower arrangement had been safely delivered to the hall, and he hurried home to tell his mum the good news. So he's made his own arrangement, and he's delivered it to the hall, and his mum hasn't seen it. The summer fair was in full swing when Bertie and his family arrived. He trailed around the stalls with Whiffer on his lead, and there were stalls selling plants, homemade jam, and all sorts of things, but nothing to interest Bertie. For some reason, Whiffer kept whining and pulling him back to the table, displaying the flower arrangements. So you can see here there's a jam stall here, all sorts of things that are knitted, and here Whiffer wants to go back to look at the flowers. Mrs. Nicely was standing by the table, talking to Bertie's mum. "I don't know what I'd do if I won again," she said. "It would be too embarrassing." "I can imagine," said Bertie's mum. "So which one is yours?" "Oh, that little vase of tiger lilies," said Mrs. Nicely, pointing to a towering display of yellow flowers. She lowered her voice and pointed. "Can you believe somebody actually entered that ghastly mess?" So she's looking at this one here. Look, what have we got there? We've got a drooping bit of prickly plant. Something that looks a bit dead there. We've got a bone. I think that's why Whiffer wants to be there. This really does look like some old dead flowers. I wonder who's done that. Who do you think? Do you think it's Bertie? This is the one Bertie's made for his mum. It was a cracked pot with dandelions and twigs, all sticking out in all directions, and in the middle was what looked like a dog's bone. "Actually," said Bertie, "I think that's the best of them all." So it is Bertie's. Mum pulled him to one side. "Bertie, where's my flower arrangement? I thought you said you gave it in." I did," said Bertie. Luckily at that moment he was interrupted by one of the judges. "Can I have your attention? We're about to announce the results of the flower arranging competition." Second prize went to Mrs. Nicely, who tried hard to not look disappointed. First prize went to Mrs. Pye's bowl of roses. "Finally," said the judge, "the prize for the most original display. This year we felt one entry beautifully captured our theme of wild nature." The judge held up a pot. It was Bertie's pot. "The winner," he said, "is Mrs. Burns, Bertie's mum." "That's us!" shouted Bertie. Whiffer barked and strained on his lead, reaching for the bone. Mum looked at Bertie and then in horror at the scruffy pot of weeds that the judge was holding. "Bertie, that is not my flower arrangement." "No," said Bertie. I had to make a few changes." "Go on," Dad whispered to Mum. "They're all waiting." Mum stepped forward to collect her prize. Her face was a deep shade of pink, so she's very embarrassed because that isn't what she wanted to put in, because even she doesn't like it. "Tell me," said the judge, "I'm curious. What gave you the idea of using a bone? It's very original." Mum shot a look at Bertie. "Oh, it was my son's idea, really. He can make a dog's dinner of anything. That means an absolute mess of anything." "I've never been so embarrassed in all my life," moaned Mum all the way home. Mrs. Nicely looked as if she was going to explode. So she's embarrassed because she came second and she didn't even win a prize for an original flower display. Bertie couldn't see what she was complaining about. After all, she'd wanted to win a prize. And she had won a prize. You would have thought she would be grateful. In any case, things had worked out pretty well. His mum had won a gardening kit, which included a large pair of green gardening gloves. Bertie was wearing them now. They were perfect for being a bin man. So after all that, Bertie's mum did win a prize, but I don't think the flower display would be going on display in my house.